So, what's the deal with dyslexia? Embarrassingly, I used to think that dyslexia meant you were dumb, and that was the association that held it in my head, and I didn't really think too much about it. It was just not even on my radar, and coming from an academic family, I used to think that dyslexia was just dumb brain disease, and I was like, yeah, people with dyslexia, they're not like the rest of us. Thankfully, my views have changed. In order to understand my journey with dyslexia, it helps to break things down into a timeline. So you have the before I was diagnosed with dyslexia, the I'm suspicious I might have dyslexia, and then the now, because I like gorillas. What else did I write in that script that I'm trying to remember? So let's start where all good stories should, in the middle. Wait, no. The beginning of my learning journey starts when I moved to Qatar, which is where I went to primary school. Qatar is a country that you've probably never heard of and is not notable for any reason whatsoever. It was there that I learnt to read and write. So you're probably familiar with the Magic Key series, a very popular series of many people my age. It is nostalgia fuel for them. And that is what I started reading. I started reading the Magic Key series. And in those series, the way it worked in our primary school was that you had a bunch of books, and it starts off with easy books, and you kind of work your way along the shelf to the really hard books, which are on the other side of the room, and they're on like the special shelf where only smart people get to read those books. And I remember reading those and getting pretty far. I think I got started on the smart people shelf, but then the year ended, and then you stopped doing the reading thing. But I got pretty far, so I wasn't bad at reading in that sense. So there was no cliche red flag for me when it came to dyslexia. But the one thing that I did struggle with quite a lot in primary school was my handwriting. My handwriting was atrocious. It looked like I was trying to write, but I had no hands. And I remember it just being so bad that when everyone else was writing with pens, I was still on pencil, and I had a pen for one lesson, and then they moved me back to pencil. They were like, nope, you can't have any of this. So I had notoriously bad handwriting, and I just remember writing in those handwriting books which have like extra lines, so you know the top of the F gets to the top of the line and the bottom of the F hits the bottom of the line, that kind of thing. It was very long, and I always performed badly. Only one time I did pretty well, and I had to super concentrate, and I don't know why. I just chose that day to just really try and write letters neatly, and I did it. But then after that I just couldn't be bothered to try, and it was just because it's just so annoying to have to think about writing the letter slowly. You just write so slowly, and then it's like you forget what you're writing because you're writing so slowly. So it's easy just to write as fast as possible. And that was the only thing that I really struggled with in primary school when it came to reading and writing. Alright, and now we can move on to the second stage, which is the I'm suspicious I might have dyslexia stage. This started in secondary school, and one of the main things that kicked it off was that I constantly kept spelling things wrong all the time. It would be so frustrating. It would be like, which weather has the H in it and which one doesn't? And I'd always just think about it for 10 minutes, write something down, and whatever I wrote down would almost 100% be wrong, and it'd be the other one, and I'd always mix it up. And another thing that I'd keep mixing up was Saturdays and Sundays, because they both begin with S. So sometimes I say to people, oh yeah, let's hang out on Sunday, but what I mean is Saturday. And then when they're messaging me on Sunday, like, where are you? I'm just confused. What do they mean? Lots of things like that were happening, and they were the main things that indicated that maybe something wasn't quite right. During secondary school, I used to always be in the library because I liked reading books still, and one of the most prevalent signs of dyslexia, the reading thing, still wasn't applicable to me because I just love reading, and I'd always be in the library reading books. And one time I remember that I went to the dyslexia section of the library where they have books where it's supposed to be easier for dyslexic people to read, and all the words on the page, I remember picking up A Christmas Carol, and the words on the page were so far spaced out you could fit a bus between each word, and I remember reading it to the end and thinking, wow, I wonder what it's like for a dyslexic person to read it. So the handwriting thing back in primary school was similar to the spelling thing, where I could probably spell pretty well if I had the time to just think about it, and I could probably write pretty neatly if I had the time to be bothered about it, but I just couldn't be bothered. It was just like, why put in the brain power when people basically understand what you're saying anyway, even if you spell things wrong? Which leads me on to a Shakespeare conspiracy theory that I have. You know how they're always saying that people don't know how Shakespeare spelled his name because he always had different spellings for it? Well, if Shakespeare's dyslexic, then it makes sense, because he just wouldn't care how he spelled his name, because he would just have to... He wouldn't care if Okay. If Shakespeare was dyslexic, then he wouldn't care how he spelled his name, because as long as people understood that it sounded phonetically like his name, then no one cared. So he'd just write his name differently. And that is my Shakespeare conspiracy theory, that he definitely was dyslexic. So the I'm suspicious era continued past my GCSEs and into my A-levels, and it was during my A-levels I actually got tested, because someone in my family got diagnosed with dyslexia, and they were like, maybe everyone else should get tested too. So I did, and I went into the test centre. This was during COVID, so I hadn't been out for such a long time, so just going outside was like I treated it as a day out. And basically what the testing doctor person did was they made me do a bunch of verbal, non-verbal tests and a whole bunch of like cognitive tests. And I remember this one test, which was the silent speed reading test, which is where they give you a passage and you have to read it in your head as fast as you can and then let the doctor know when you're done. So I sit there and I'm like, all right, I'm going to blow through this. Let's go. Sit down, start reading. I'm going so fast. I'm going like insanely fast, reading in my head. I'm like, da-da-da. And then I reach the end. I tell him I've reached the end. He's like, all right, cool. And I think to myself, damn, I read that so fast. There's no way I have dyslexia.
All right, let's take a look here. So you scored in the bottom 10% of the country. You dumb.
So I left happy from that place because I finally had an explanation for all the weirdness that was happening in my education. The doctor gave me an explanation of what dyslexia does cognitively, and he said that it's a challenge with short-term memory, which means it's harder to keep things in the short-term memory, which means it's harder to commit them to long-term memory. This leads to the kind of forgetfulness and the language processing challenges, and one way to help overcome it is to, remember novel details. Dyslexia goes well with stories. It turns out that dyslexics are good storytellers. Hey, I'm doing it right now, so I guess. Okay. And if you're dyslexic, make sure you ask for clarification, because that's one of the things that I've started doing now, is that even when I think I heard it right, I make sure I ask again, just to make sure that things are clear. And also the bonus of that is that you find out whose patience is sure. Also, if you haven't already, please make sure to like and subscribe. It feels very weird saying this because this is the first time I am saying this to the microphone in my room, but I make these videos for fun, and it's really nice to see support for these small little things I do. And yeah, I'd appreciate it a lot. Like and subscribe and all the other things that come with it, like watching the videos. Yes, cool, thank you. And back to the story. It's important to note that this is my experience with dyslexia, so other dyslexics might have different experiences, and I'd be interested to hear about them. So if you have a story that you'd like to tell, you can put it in the comment section as well, and that'd be appreciated. Thank you. Now we're on to the now, which is where we are now. And this is where I kind of used all the benefits of getting the diagnosis of dyslexia, such as extra time, being in a different room to everyone during exams. And right now where I'm at, university, you get a special fund for having dyslexia, and this lets you buy like equipment and pay for software that you might need to help. So all very good things, and it's very handy. And if you are dyslexic and you don't know about these things, you should definitely jump onto them, because every little helps.
I feel like I somewhat let people down who struggled with dyslexia by having such a narrow view. There's still a lot more research needed for dyslexia and other neurodivergent brain states. The newest thing I've learned, and this is more generally about study habits than dyslexia, is that some days I can hyper-focus on reading academic papers, whilst other days it's like a different language. For those of you who made the right life choices and have never had to read an academic paper, they're basically walls of complicated text, super detailed, super specific, super painful to read. Some days I can't get through and have to revise something else. Other days it's like I'm superhuman. I can just multitask, listen to music and read with full comprehension of what I'm reading. I don't know what causes these moments, but I make sure to use them to my advantage. Oh, would you look at that? We're all out of time. I've got exams to revise for, so I should probably start doing that now.
Outro, activate.
Ah! Alright, so I'm recording this when my exams are over, and I have time for a bonus story. Yay! Right, so during A-levels, I chose maths as one of my subjects. Now, if you don't know this, in maths, you need something called a calculator, and you need that for pretty much every single lesson. You have to always remember to bring your calculator. Now, I was notoriously disorganized, and very quickly my friends caught on that every single time there was a math lesson, and this is no joke, literally every math lesson, I would not have a calculator. And it's not because like I chose not to put it in, I just kept taking it in and out of my bag to do like homework and stuff, and it just so happened that every single math lesson I just would not have it because I'd taken it out or I'd done something else with it. And I remember one time there was an entire week where I just forgot to bring my calculator to my math lessons for that whole week, and I was always like borrowing people's calculators. And at first my friends were like, oh yeah, that's kind of funny, haha, Hamza keeps forgetting his calculator. And then they got genuinely concerned because I just would stop, I just couldn't bring it. And it's like no matter how hard I try, I set alarms, I'd write notes to myself to bring my calculator, I'd somehow still end up forgetting. And it got so bad that on my exam day, I got thousands of messages just like reminding me, bring your calculator, bring your calculator, bring it, bring it, bring it. And I'd just like to say thank you to all those friends, because if you had not reminded me, I 100% would have forgotten and messed up completely and not passed my A-levels. So shout out to those friends. Thank you very much. It's important to note actually that this is my experience with dyslexia, so people might have other fuck's sake.